Marry me, Annie here, although this time I should say Annika here because I am going to do a video response to Hexetraum on the origins of our names or our screen names. So I thought I would do something about both. Hexetraum is actually, her video is a response to someone else, so I'm going to try and get to the root of this and see where it started and post this appropriately, but I will most definitely post it as a response to Hexetraum. So let's start with mirth and reverence, and those of you who have studied Wicca know that it's one of the 8 virtues. It's one of the couplets in the charge of mirth and reverence, and throughout my life it has seemed to have always been about joy and gratitude, and the equivalent to me in that, in the couplets in the charge, is mirth and reverence. So I chose it for my screen name here because I knew that others who call themselves Wiccans, who know the charge, would recognize me as a sister. So it's the reason I decided to use it here. But beyond that, it's the way I live, and it's been my mantra since I was in my 20s, to celebrate and to be thankful. So that's why I am mirth and reverence as a screen name. Now, my craft name is Annika, and I have had that since the mid-70s, and that is, for the curious, A-H-N-E-K-E. And I purposely did not use that when I came to YouTube because we have a couple of people who have similar names, and I just felt like it was like imposing on their territory, should I say? I don't know, I felt more comfortable using the nickname that I've been given over the years, and which I am called in mundane life too, which is Annie, which is an abbreviation nickname for Annika. Now, I think the story about how I took on Annika as a craft name is interesting. I hope you do. Annika, spelled A-N-N-E-K-E, is an ancestress of mine from the Dutch half of my family. And she arrived in Manhattan in the 1600s here in the United States, so obviously she was the first of my forebears to step foot on this land. And she was a very, very interesting character, and well known for her time, and there are journals and articles and paintings and quite a history around her. And when I was a young girl and I found out about her behaviors and how she was in the world, she inspired me. She was a woman who lived her own life in a time at which women didn't live their own lives. She was widowed soon after she came to Manhattan, and of course in those days a woman with land holdings and any means of supporting herself was very unusual. Now eventually she married again, and there's all kinds of exotic stories about the bugger that she married the next time around, and he's also all over the internet. So family history there. But about the family history, what inspired me as a young girl was this woman's independence and spit and fire, and it came through after all these hundreds of years. And it just carried me through as a young woman, as an inspiration. I was a very meek and mild-mannered young woman and had no sense of self-esteem well into my teens. And Annika was inspiring to me. I had a first and very quick divorce as a very young woman just out of high school. Very abusive situation, and it was annulled and over with, but of course I was very wounded. And there had never been a divorce in my entire history of my family. And she inspired me throughout that time and became very present in my life in dreams and in meditations. And I started to acknowledge that she was actually a reality in my life, not just an ancestress, but a guide, an ancestor who came to me as a guide. And I always wanted to name myself after her. And I would not do that while my parents were alive because I am in part, with my given name, named after my mother. So my goal has always been that when my parents pass, that I will take on the name in reality. And we'll see what happens. My parents are very elderly. I'm still proud to hold the name that they gave me, but I'm really not known by it, except by them at this point in my life. So back to Annika, my first priest, the man who initiated me into Wicca in the 70s. The tradition was that your initiator is the one who gave you your craft name. You had no say in that. And I announced to him, one of my few early stand up and be counted moments in life because I was still very shy. I announced to him that I wanted her name. And he said absolutely not, that he knew what he was going to call me and that I needed to accept that name. And throughout my training with him, there was every now and then a bit of a butt head over that, and I became more emphatic that I was meant to be named after her, and he became more emphatic that he's the one who would decide what I would be named, and it would not be after her. And when it came down to initiation, I actually thought about not initiating because he and I could not come to terms on this, and I knew I needed to be named after her. But the week before my initiation, one of the last times I met with him before going into retreat, before the night of the initiation, he announced to me rather brusquely, "I have determined that your name shall be Annika." And he would not discuss it. It was several years later before I knew what had happened. It appears that Annika, after her life on Earth, was as feisty and opinionated and as assertive as she had been in life, and she had decided she would come to him in dreams every night until he agreed to give me her name. I found this out years later when there was problems between my priest and priestess as their marriage was dissolving and they weren't necessarily holding their confidences the way they may have earlier in their marriage, and my priestess told me what had happened. She didn't give me a lot of details, but I found out years later why he decided I'd be named after Annika, because she basically made it clear to him that this is what it will be, or you're going to have to deal with me every night the rest of your life. So that's why I wanted to share the story. I love this story. I really love this story. I do spell it slightly differently. Her name was Anneke, and I spelled Ahneke because, like the sound of Om is so powerful in meditation, An is the sound, the drone, the tone that is the most powerful to me. So my name honors both that I was named after her at my first initiation, and that the An sound is very important to me. And I do have plans at some point in my life as I age and don't feel as responsible to maintain the name I was given by my parents out of respect for them, that I will take it on legally. So there's my story about where my name came from. Both Mirth and Reverence, which I use on YouTube, is my channel name, and Annika, you knowing me as Annie. I love these stories and I'm looking forward to lots of video responses from folks on this. I'm going to post this to Hexetraum, and I'm also going to try and find out where she was responding to, so I can get back to the root of these circles upon circles at YouTube and share this so that I can also see what other people's stories are. Merry part. I wish you mirth and reverence.